Skylab. The United States' first space station was launched by NASA and used for about 24 weeks between May 1973 and February 1974. There were 3 missions with 3 crews, and each crew contained 3 astronauts. Skylab 2, Skylab 3, and Skylab 4 were the only missions completed. Skylab missions used an onboard orbital workshop and a solar observatory in which a vast amount of experiments were carried out. Ultimately, Skylab's orbit started to decay and it disintegrated in the atmosphere, scattering debris across the Indian Ocean and Western Australia on July 11, 1979. Skylab was the only space station solely operated by the United States. In 1993, the U.S. shifted to the International Space Station. Skylab weighed in at just under 200,000 pounds with an attached Apollo command and service module. Skylab was launched without a crew into Earth's low orbit via a Saturn V rocket. 3 subsequent missions carried 3 manned crews of astronauts to Skylab. Skylab was not equipped with a recycling system, such as a conversion of urine to drinking water. It also did not dispose of waste by dumping it into space. The 19,360-gallon liquid oxygen tank below the orbital workshop was used to store trash and wastewater that was accessed through an airlock. Skylab was launched on May 14, 1973 on a Saturn V rocket, which is referred to as Skylab 1 mission. Severe damage was sustained during launch and deployment, including the loss of the station's micrometeoroid shield and sunshade, along with one of its main solar panels. Debris from the lost micrometeoroid shield further complicated matters by becoming entangled in the remaining solar panel and preventing its full deployment. This left Skylab with a huge power deficit. Shortly after Skylab's launch, Pad 39A at Kennedy Space Center was deactivated, and construction proceeded to modify it for the upcoming Space Shuttle program. The first crewed mission, Skylab 2, launched on May 25, 1973, and involved extensive repairs to the station. The crew deployed a parasol-like sunshade through a small instrument port from the inside of the station, bringing station temperatures down to acceptable levels and preventing overheating that would have melted the plastic insulation inside the station and released poisonous gases. This solution was designed by Jack Kinsler, who won the NASA Distinguished Service Medal for his efforts and ingenuity. The crew conducted further repairs via 2 spacewalks. The crew stayed in orbit with Skylab for 28 days. 2 additional missions followed, with the launch dates of July 28, 1973, Skylab 3 and November 16, 1973, Skylab 4, and mission durations of 59 and 84 days, respectively. The last Skylab crew returned to Earth on February 8, 1974. There were no more returning crews from this point. Skylab included the Apollo telescope mount, which consisted of a multispectral solar observatory, a multiple docking adapter with 2 docking ports, an airlock module with extravehicular activity hatches, and the orbital workshop, the main habitable space inside Skylab. Electrical power came from solar arrays and fuel cells in the docked Apollo module. In the rear of the station was a large waste tank, the propellant tanks for the maneuvering jets, and a heater radiator. The Apollo telescope significantly advanced solar science, and observation of the sun was unprecedented. Astronauts took thousands of photographs of Earth, and the Earth Resources Experiment package viewed Earth with sensors that recorded data in the visible, infrared, and microwave spectral regions. The record for human time spent in orbit was extended beyond the 23 days, set by the Soyuz 11 crew aboard Salyut 1 to 84 days by the Skylab 4 crew. Another great experiment was the 3-man crew of the Skylab Medical Experiment Altitude Test, who spent 56 days in 1972 at low pressure on Earth to evaluate experimental medical equipment. Originally intended to be visited by 128-day and 256-day missions for a total of 140 days, Skylab was ultimately occupied for 171 days and 13 hours during its 3 crewed expeditions, orbiting the Earth 2,476 times. Each of these extended the human record of 23 days for amount of time spent in space, set by the Soviet Soyuz 11 crew aboard the space station Salyut 1 on June 30, 1971. Skylab 2 lasted 28 days, Skylab 3 to 56 days, and Skylab 4 to 84 days. Astronauts performed 10 spacewalks, totaling 42 hours and 16 minutes. Skylab logged about 2,000 hours of scientific and medical experiments, over 127,000 images of the Sun, and over 46,000 of Earth. Solar experiments included photographs of 8 solar flares and produced valuable results that scientists stated would have been impossible to obtain with uncrewed spacecraft. The existence of the Sun's coronal holes was confirmed because of these efforts. Many of the experiments conducted investigated the astronauts' adaptation to extended periods of microgravity.
The first crew enjoyed taking a shower once a week, but found drying themselves in weightlessness and vacuuming excess water difficult. In later missions, crews usually cleaned themselves daily with wet washcloths instead of using the shower. To bathe, the user coupled a pressurized bottle of warmed water to the shower's plumbing, then stepped inside and secured the curtain. A push-button shower nozzle was connected by a stiff hose to the top of the shower. The system was designed for about 6 pints, or roughly 2.8 liters of water per shower, with water being drawn from the personal hygiene water tank. The use of both the liquid soap and water was carefully planned out, with enough soap and warm water for 1 shower a week for each crew member. The first astronaut to use the space shower was Paul Weitz on Skylab 2, the first crewed mission. He said, "It took a fair amount longer to use than you might expect, but you come out smelling good." A Skylab shower took about 2.5 hours, including the time to set up the shower and dissipate used water. The procedure for operating the shower was as follows. Fill up the pressurized water bottle with hot water and attach it to the ceiling. Connect the hose and pull up the shower curtain. Spray down with water. Apply liquid soap and spray more water to rinse. Vacuum up all the fluids and stow items. Breakfast began at 7 a.m. They reported that their food, although greatly improved from Apollo, was bland and repetitive, and weightlessness caused utensils, food containers, and bits of food to float away. Also, gas in their drinking water contributed to flatulence. After breakfast and preparation for lunch, experiments, tests, and repairs of spacecraft systems, and, if possible, 90 minutes of physical exercise followed. The station had a bicycle and other equipment, and astronauts could jog around the water tank. After dinner, which was scheduled for 6 p.m., crews performed cleanup duties and prepared for the next day's experiments. The station offered a satisfactory living and working environment for crews with enough room for personal privacy and complete with a dart set, playing cards, and other recreational equipment in addition to books and music players. However, the window with its view of Earth became the most popular way to relax in orbit. Skylab 3 mission would be the last mission to Skylab, as its orbit had decayed so much so that it was deemed unsafe to use.
Skylab's falling back to Earth in 1979 was an international media event with people buying T-shirts and hats marked with bullseyes and "The Sky is Falling." There was also a lot of wagering on the time and place of re-entry and nightly news reports. The San Francisco Examiner offered a $10,000 prize for the first piece of Skylab delivered to its offices. The rival San Francisco Chronicle offered $200,000 if a subscriber suffered personal or property damage. A Nebraska neighborhood painted a target so that the station would have something to aim for, a resident said. A report commissioned by NASA calculated that the odds were 1 in 152 of debris hitting any human, and odds of 1 in 7 of debris hitting a city of 100,000 people or more. A week before re-entry, NASA forecast that it would occur between July 10th and 14th, with the 12th the most likely date, and the Royal Aircraft Establishment predicted the 14th. In the hours before the event, ground controllers adjusted Skylab's orientation to minimize the risk of re-entry on a populated area. They aimed the station at a spot 810 miles south-southeast of Cape Town, South Africa, and re-entry began at approximately 4 p.m. July 11, 1979. The station did not burn up as fast as NASA expected. Debris landed about 300 miles east of Perth, Western Australia, due to a small calculation error, and was found between Esperance, Western Australia, and Rolina in a 93-mile radius around Baledonia, Western Australia. Residents and an airline pilot saw dozens of colorful flames as the larger pieces broke up in the atmosphere. The debris landed in a mostly unpopulated area, but the sighting still caused NASA to fear human injury or property damage. There were no reported injuries or loss of property. Stan Thornton of Australia found 24 pieces of Skylab around his home in the town of Esperance. Thornton flew to San Francisco, where he waited a week for Marshall Space Flight Center to authenticate the wreckage, to collect the Examiner Prize plus another $1,000 from a Philadelphia businessman who had flown Thornton's family and girlfriend there. The Shire of Esperance fined NASA $400 for littering. The fine was written off 3 months later, but eventually paid on April of 2009 by Scott Barley of Highway Radio, who had raised the funds from contributions of his morning radio show audience.